He went into the woods for peace, but found pain. When he fell, alone and broken, no one heard him. No one, except something wild, something no one could have expected. Not a ranger, not a friend, not even a human, but a grizzly bear. And what that bear did next defied every rule, every fear, and left even scientists speechless. This story will make you rethink everything you believe about nature, instinct, and compassion. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us share more real-life stories that reveal the quiet miracles happening where humanity and wilderness meet. Eli Davis wasn't the kind of man who usually got lost. 52 years old, former military. Now retired and living part-time in a converted van, Eli had hiked more trails in Montana than most people had driven highways. Solitude was his medicine. The forest, his sanctuary. But on that cold November afternoon, the silence he loved would betray him. The air was sharp and still. Eli had wandered a bit farther than planned from his usual loop near the Flathead National Forest. He didn't worry. The terrain was familiar. And even with the clouds rolling in, he trusted his boots and his instincts. But then came the slope. It looked harmless at first, a gentle dip beneath a ridge scattered with pine needles and moss-covered stones. He stepped down. The moss slipped, his ankle twisted, and in an instant he was down, hard. The sound that came out of him wasn't a scream, it was something guttural, torn, not just from pain, but from fear. He tried to move, and pain shot like fire through his leg, his ankle, possibly fractured, his knee, wrenched, his back, jarred. He lay there, staring at the gray sky between trees, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years. Panic. No signal, no whistle, no radio, just wind, and pine, and the taste of blood in his mouth from where he'd bitten his tongue on the way down. Eli didn't cry. He didn't beg. But he did groan. Low, involuntary sounds that came every time he tried to shift his body. Hours passed. The temperature dropped. His hands began to stiffen. His breath came in bursts. Snowflakes started to drift from the clouds above. And then he heard something. Not wind, not birds, not the distant creak of trees. Footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. His mind raced. Bear? Cougar? Something drawn by weakness? He couldn't run, couldn't even crawl. All he could do was wait. The sounds grew closer, and then, through the brush, it stepped into view. A grizzly, massive, thick shoulders, scarred muzzle, breath fogging the air. It stood still, watching him. Eli's heartbeat thundered in his ears. This wasn't how he imagined dying, not like this. The bear sniffed once, then took a step forward. Eli braced. But what the bear did next would defy everything he thought he knew about fear and nature. The bear didn't growl. It didn't charge. It didn't even seem interested in Eli as prey. It just stood there, 10 feet away, head slightly tilted, eyes fixed on the man crumpled in the snow. Eli had seen bears before. In his younger years, he'd even helped tag one in Alaska during a brief research stint. He knew their power, their unpredictability, their detachment. This one was different. It didn't seem startled, or aggressive, or hungry. It seemed curious. Minutes passed. Eli couldn't breathe right. Not from pain now, but from confusion. His instincts told him to stay still, not to challenge, not to speak. But then the bear stepped closer, and another step. 5 feet now. Its paw sank into the snow just inches from Eli's outstretched hand. He turned his head slightly, flinching, but the bear paused, sniffed, and then, in one strange, slow movement, it sat down. Eli blinked. The bear was still watching him, not moving, not threatening, just there. Time felt unreal. The forest was utterly silent but for Eli's breath, shaky, short, and the bear's, low, steady, and steaming in the cold. Was it guarding him? Inspecting? Was it waiting for death to come, to claim what the storm already started? Or was it something else? Eli didn't know. But what he did know, what hit him harder than the fall, than the pain, was this. He wasn't alone anymore. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched across the snow. Eli tried to move, wincing hard as he pushed himself slightly upright against a log. The bear didn't react, didn't flinch. It just adjusted its weight slightly, and stayed. The cold began creeping into Eli's chest. His fingers were nearly useless. His lips cracked. He muttered something. Not a prayer exactly, but something close. A memory. A wish. A goodbye? The bear's ears twitched. Then, slowly, carefully, it stood up again. Eli tensed. But instead of coming closer, the bear circled behind him. He lost sight of it. A branch snapped. Then another. He waited for teeth. Waited for silence. But instead, he felt something warm behind him. The bear had laid down, just feet away, directly behind his back. A living wall of fur and breath. A presence of heat. Eli didn't dare turn around fully. But he knew. The bear had settled beside him. Not to feed, not to kill, but to stay. His breath hitched. A man who'd spent a life understanding boundaries, the limits between man and beast, now felt something that couldn't be explained by training or books. Not mercy, not instinct, something else. Something that might have saved his life. The stars appeared. Eli's eyes flickered closed, and in the freezing silence of a Montana forest, he leaned back, barely, into the warmth that should have been a nightmare, but felt somehow like grace. The stars above the trees didn't blink. They stared, still and sharp, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Below them, Eli lay stiff against the snow-packed ground. His body had passed pain hours ago. Now it hovered somewhere between numbness and awareness, just enough to know he hadn't died. Not yet. And behind him, like a mountain-shaped shadow, was the bear. Still. Breathing. Warm. The heat radiating from the bear's massive body was no illusion. Eli could feel it bleeding through the air gap between them, and when he dared to inch backward, just slightly, his shoulders brushed something solid and soft at the same time. Fur. He expected a reaction, a growl, a swipe, a sound of warning, but there was nothing. The bear stayed. He whispered into the dark, barely audible. "I don't know what this is." He wasn't talking to the bear. Not really. Maybe to the stars. Maybe to himself. His teeth chattered between words, his lips dry and swollen from the cold. He knew the dangers: hypothermia, dehydration, shock. He also knew this forest had no trail markers here, no ranger station within miles, and no one expecting him until Tuesday. It was Sunday night. Time twisted in the dark. Sometimes he drifted, not quite asleep, but not awake. Memories came in flashes. His daughter's voice on the phone asking if he ever got lonely. His wife's old sweater folded in a box he refused to throw out. The taste of bitter coffee in his thermos, now half buried in the snow somewhere behind him. And through it all, the sound of the bear breathing, a rhythm, a constant, a reminder that he wasn't completely gone yet. At one point, maybe near midnight, a howl echoed in the distance. Not a coyote. Wolves. Eli's breath caught. The bear heard it too. Its body stiffened behind him. He didn't turn to look, but he felt the shift, the change in posture. The calm was replaced with alertness. A moment later, the bear rose. Snow shifted. Eli felt the heat disappear from his back, and in that instant, he thought, "This is it. Now I'm really alone." But then, a low rumble vibrated through the trees. The bear wasn't walking away. It was growling, not at Eli, but outward, toward the darkness. A warning. Another rumble. Louder. Silence. And then, after long, cold seconds, nothing. The forest swallowed the threat. The bear settled back down, closer this time. And Eli, heart pounding, let the heat return. He didn't know why it stayed, didn't know why it warned the others away, but he whispered again into the night, "Thank you." Not because he thought the bear understood, not because it was tame, but because something, maybe the last thing keeping his heart beating, needed to be said out loud. He closed his eyes again, and when sleep finally came, it wasn't peaceful, but it came with the sound of breath behind him, and life beside him. The first light came slow, gray and pale, seeping through the tall trees like spilled milk over pine needles. It touched the snow with quiet fingers and crept across the ground until it reached the edge of Eli's boot. That's when he knew. He had survived the night. He opened his eyes. They burned from dryness, and his limbs felt like frozen rope, stiff, reluctant to obey. But he was breathing, still here. He shifted slightly and winced. His knee was worse now, swollen, tight. His ankle wasn't much better. The cold had kept the swelling down overnight, but movement was agony. And yet, the pain was almost comforting, because pain meant he wasn't dead. Behind him, a low sound stirred the quiet. Not wind, not birds. The bear. still there. It lay curled, massive and motionless except for its breath. Slow, warm clouds rising into the chilled morning air. Its eyes were open now, watching him. Eli stared back for a long moment, then whispered, "You're still here?" The bear didn't move, didn't snarl, didn't retreat, just held his gaze. Eli reached, slowly, with the tip of one gloved finger, for a branch nearby. He dragged it toward himself. No real use, but it made him feel less helpless. Then he looked up and realized what he hadn't seen in the night. There were tracks in the snow around them. Big ones, smaller ones, and a line of disturbed snow leading from his fall site to here. That made no sense. He hadn't crawled here. Had he? His thoughts fogged. "Did you drag me?" he muttered aloud. It sounded ridiculous, impossible, delirium. But something about the trail, the way his backpack had ended up closer than where he fell, made him question everything. He didn't press it. He couldn't. Instead, he pulled his pack toward himself and checked for anything useful. His thermos, still intact. He shook it. Warm. Barely. He unscrewed the top and took a sip. It hurt going down, but it tasted like salvation. He looked at the bear again, then, with slow hands, poured a little into the lid and set it in the snow near the bear's front paw. "You kept me warm," he said. "Figure I owe you something back." The bear didn't touch the lid, didn't sniff, just watched. Time passed. By mid-morning, the bear rose. Eli held his breath. The bear turned, not toward him, but toward the woods. It walked 10 paces, stopped, then looked back, waited. Eli stared. "You want me to follow?" He laughed once, dry and painful. "I can't stand up, pal." The bear waited a few seconds longer, then huffed and came back. Lay down again. Closer this time. Eli felt the message in that silence. You're not done, but you're not moving alone either. And so they stayed. A man too broken to walk, and a bear who could have left 100 times, but didn't. Eli had always believed in silence, not the kind that came from awkward pauses, but the deep, old silence, the kind you find in forests, the kind that doesn't ask questions, doesn't fill space, just is. And now, that silence held him like a second skin, side by side with the grizzly that refused to leave. That morning, as his fingers regained feeling and his mind cleared enough to think in full sentences, Eli realized something dangerous. If he didn't move soon, he wouldn't move at all. "Okay," he muttered, teeth gritted. "We do this your way." He leaned on the stick he'd found the day before and pushed himself upright with a groan that seemed to wake the trees. His knee screamed, his ankle protested. But he was up, half standing, half hanging. The bear rose too, like a shadow lifting off the snow. It didn't come closer, didn't threaten, just watched. And then it turned, took 3 slow steps, paused, looked back. Eli stared. "You're serious?" The bear took another step. Eli shifted his weight forward and followed. The snow made it hard. Each step sent fire up his leg. His stick sank deep and threatened to snap. His breath fogged the air in bursts. But the bear kept just ahead, never too far, always visible, always waiting when Eli paused. It was absurd, insane, but also the only thing that made sense anymore. They didn't go far that day, just 100 yards maybe, toward the edge of the ridge line. There, nestled beneath a rock outcropping, the bear stopped and lay down. A natural windbreak, shelter from the afternoon chill. Eli collapsed beside it, his back to the fur again. He didn't even ask this time. He just whispered, "Thank you." By the second day, they had a rhythm. Eli moved. The bear led. When he fell, the bear waited. Sometimes it circled behind him as if guarding his blind spots. Sometimes it disappeared for hours, returning later. Quiet, massive, and always watching. Once, Eli heard a rustle in the trees. He turned, heart racing, and saw a fox darting away. The bear had stood up, towering in the background, and then sat down again. Still protecting him, Eli thought. Even now. On the fourth day, they reached the frozen stream. It shimmered under pale light, a ribbon of glass cutting through white and green. Eli knew where they were now, just 2 miles from the service road, maybe less. He turned to the bear, not to speak, but to see. It stood on the other side of the ice, watching him with those deep, steady eyes. And for the first time, Eli didn't feel like a man surviving. He felt like a man being carried, step by step, by something ancient and kind. They camped beneath a thicket of spruce that night. No fire, no talking, just breath and warmth. And when Eli opened his eyes the next morning, the bear was gone. Tracks in the snow, leading back into the trees. Not a goodbye, not even a moment. Just gone. Eli sat there for a long time, staring at the forest's edge. He didn't cry, but his voice cracked when he said, "You brought me back." The ranger station was a small building of weathered pine and metal, nestled at the base of the service road where the trail system met the main road into town. Eli limped through its door at 9:13 a.m., 4 days after the fall that should have killed him. The bell above the door chimed softly. Behind the desk, Ranger Marta Kelso looked up from her radio and froze. "Eli?" He gave a half smile, half wince. "Morning." 10 minutes later, he was wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping hot coffee, his leg propped up on a makeshift stool. A radio buzzed in the background as another ranger called for medical support. Marta sat across from him, eyes wide. "You were supposed to be out for a 2-day hike," she said. "Today's day 6. Eli nodded. "I know." "You fell?" He nodded again. "Injuries?" "Ankles busted. Knees bad. Could have gone worse." Marta leaned forward. "So, how did you survive?" Eli stared at his coffee for a long time. Steam rose in curls. Outside, a jaybird cried in the distance. And then he said, softly, A bear found me. Marta blinked. A bear? Eli nodded. A grizzly. Her hand paused mid-air, holding a pen. You mean it didn't attack? Eli shook his head. It stayed. He told her. Not everything. Not the way it lay beside him through the night, or the way it led him across the forest like a shadow that knew the map. But enough. Enough to leave Marta silent, her hand frozen over her notepad. After a pause, she asked, You're sure it was the same bear the whole time? I'm sure. And you're saying it helped you? I'm saying, Eli said, that I wouldn't be here if it hadn't. They called it shock. They called it trauma. They said he was lucky. But the story made its way up the chain. First to fish and wildlife, then to a university researcher who had studied grizzly behavior for 2 decades. He asked to meet Eli personally, and when he heard the story, he didn't laugh. He just said, I've never heard of anything like it. Eli recovered slowly. Physical therapy, a walking boot, painkillers. But something inside healed faster than anyone expected. A part of him that hadn't spoken in years began to wake up. Not because of the bear, because of what the bear didn't do, didn't kill, didn't flee, didn't abandon. One afternoon, months later, Eli returned to the ranger station to deliver a letter. It was a simple request. I'd like to sponsor a sign near the trailhead. A reminder. What kind of sign? Marta asked. Eli smiled. Just 3 words. He handed it to her. Black ink, neat handwriting. Respect runs deeper. The trail looked different now. Not because the trees had changed. They hadn't. Not really. The ridge still curved the same way. The rock outcropping still caught the light in the afternoon. The stream still whispered through the underbrush. But Eli had changed. And so, the forest had too. It had been 7 months since the fall. Long enough for his body to mostly heal. Long enough for the story to quiet. But not long enough for him to forget. He walked with a cane now, more out of habit than need. He still hiked, though shorter trails. Still wore the same boots, though they'd been resoled. Still came alone. But he wasn't the same man who had fallen here in the snow. He reached the clearing by early afternoon. The spot where he'd lain. Where he'd nearly died. Where something wild had chosen to stay. He stood in silence for a long time, then lowered his backpack, opened it, and carefully removed a small wooden post, a hand-carved plaque attached to it. He drove it gently into the ground, leveled it, stepped back. It read, To the one who stayed. He didn't expect anyone to understand. Most would walk past it, never noticing. A few might ask. But he didn't need the world to believe what had happened. He just needed this place to remember. Birdsong drifted through the pines. A light breeze stirred the leaves. And somewhere, deeper in the trees, a branch cracked. He turned his head, waited. Nothing came. No shape. No sound. Just the forest. Just the quiet. But he smiled. Not because he thought the bear was near. Not because he needed it to be. But because something in him, something deep, still carried the warmth of that night. The breath, the wait, the watching, and the choice. He stayed there until the light began to change. Then he placed his hand gently on the post and whispered, "Wherever you are, I remember," and turned back toward the trail, back to the world, but never far from the forest, and never forgetting that once, when he could do nothing for himself, something wild stayed beside him, not for glory, not for recognition, but because, somehow, it knew. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet miracles. Because sometimes kindness comes on four legs and asks nothing in return. Imagine walking through a frozen forest, the bitter cold piercing through your clothes. The silence is deafening, except for the occasional rustle of the wind. Suddenly, you see something that makes your heart stop. A massive grizzly bear, shivering, its powerful body tied tightly to a tree with thick chains. Its fur is matted with frost, its breathing shallow. It looks at you, not with aggression, but with desperation and fear. Who could have done this? And why? This is exactly what happened to Emily Carter, a woman who had spent years studying wildlife, but had never witnessed such cruelty. What she did next would not only change her life, but would also defy everything people believed about grizzly bears. This is a story of courage, survival, and an unbreakable bond between a human and a wild animal. But what happened after she freed the bear will leave you speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring and emotional story like this. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable journey. Emily Carter wasn't afraid of the cold. She had spent most of her life in the Alaskan wilderness, tracking animals, documenting their behaviors, and fighting against illegal poaching. But that morning, something felt different. Wrapped in her thick winter coat, she trudged through the heavy snow, her boots sinking with every step. The world around her was eerily silent, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then she heard it, a low, almost inaudible whimper. She stopped. Her heartbeat quickened. Scanning the area, she saw nothing but endless trees, their branches weighed down by snow. But the sound came again, a heartbreaking, weak cry. She followed the noise, her breath visible in the freezing air. And then she saw it, a massive grizzly bear. But something was terribly wrong. The bear was chained to a tree, its body hunched, its fur coated in ice and snow. Its powerful legs trembled, its breath slow and labored. It had been left to die. Emily felt a lump in her throat. She had seen many terrible things in the wild, but this was pure cruelty. She took a cautious step forward. The bear lifted its head weakly, its eyes meeting hers. There was no aggression, no warning growl, just pain and exhaustion. Emily's instincts screamed at her, "Help him." But how? The bear was still dangerous. If she made the wrong move, she could become its next victim. But leaving it there meant certain death for the animal. Emily had to make a choice, and she had to make it fast. Emily took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the survival knife strapped to her belt. She had freed animals from traps before, but never anything this massive, never a grizzly bear. Her breath clouded in the freezing air as she stepped cautiously forward. The bear's eyes followed her, wary but lacking the aggression she had expected. It was as if he knew she was his only hope. Then, Emily saw something that made her blood run cold. The chains around the bear's body were not old hunting snares or discarded traps. They were thick metal chains, intentionally wrapped around his torso and legs. Someone had done this on purpose. Her stomach twisted in disgust. Who would do this? And why? The bear whimpered again, shifting slightly in the snow, his massive body trembling from exhaustion and hunger. Emily knew she had very little time before the cold completely overtook him. She reached into her backpack, pulling out a small bolt cutter she always carried in case she came across illegal poacher traps. But as she kneeled next to the bear, she realized the chains were too thick. The bolt cutter barely scratched the metal. Frustration boiled inside her. She needed a stronger tool, and she needed it now. The bear let out a long, shuddering breath, his head drooping lower. Emily panicked. Was he dying right in front of her? No. She would not let this happen. Taking off her glove, she gently placed her hand on his fur, feeling the icy coldness that clung to him. She could feel his labored breathing beneath her fingers, the slow rise and fall of a body that had almost given up. "Hold on, big guy," she whispered. "I'll be right back." She sprinted toward her snowmobile, her boots slipping against the ice as she ran. The moment she reached her vehicle, she grabbed her emergency toolkit, a heavier bolt cutter and a folding saw. The minutes were ticking away. Emily rushed back to the bear, who hadn't moved. For a split second, she feared she was too late. But then she saw the slow movement of his chest, the slight flicker of his ear. He was still alive. She dropped to her knees in the snow and positioned the heavy-duty bolt cutter against the first chain. Gritting her teeth, she applied pressure, her hands freezing, her arms burning from the effort. Snap! The first link gave way. The bear flinched, letting out a deep but weak growl. Emily froze, her heartbeat hammering in her chest. But the bear did not attack. He merely shifted, his body tensing as if anticipating more pain. Emily swallowed hard and kept going. She worked as fast as she could, cutting through each chain, freeing him piece by piece. Every broken link felt like a small victory, but she wasn't done yet. The final chain was wrapped around his front legs, cutting into the skin. Blood, now frozen, crusted against his fur. Emily's hands trembled as she positioned the saw and began cutting away the thick metal. The bear let out a soft rumble, almost like a sigh. And then, finally, the last piece of metal fell into the snow. He was free. Emily stumbled backward, her pulse racing. The bear shifted, his muscles tensing as he tried to move for the first time in who knows how long. Would he attack her? Would he run? The grizzly lifted his head, staring at her. Then, slowly, painfully, he tried to stand. His legs shook. His body wobbled unsteadily, but he didn't collapse. Emily held her breath. This was the moment of truth. The bear turned his massive head toward her, their eyes meeting once more. There was no rage, no attack, only a silent understanding. And then, with one final look, He turned away and began to limp toward the forest. Emily exhaled sharply, her legs weak beneath her. She had done it. But one question haunted her mind. Who had done this to him? And would they do it again? Emily stood in the snow, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts, watching the grizzly limp away into the forest. The thick chains lay scattered around her boots, their cold metal glistening under the weak winter sunlight. Her heart still hammered in her chest. She had done something incredibly dangerous, freeing a wild animal in distress. But she knew, deep in her gut, that she had made the right choice. But something wasn't sitting right. Who would chain a bear in the middle of nowhere? Emily scanned the area, her sharp eyes moving over the untouched snow. The forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of tree branches weighed down by frost. Then she saw it. Footprints. They weren't bear tracks. They were human. Following the trail, Emily dropped to a crouch, examining the footprints more closely. They were fresh, leading away from the tree where the bear had been restrained. Whoever had done this had been here recently. She clenched her jaw, anger bubbling inside her. There were a lot of hunters in these woods, but no real poachers, not that she knew of. Chaining a bear like that wasn't just cruel, it was unnatural. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. No signal. Typical. The thick pines and the remote location made it impossible to call for help. She'd have to handle this on her own. With a deep breath, she followed the footprints into the forest, every step crunching softly in the snow. Emily followed the trail for nearly 15 minutes before she spotted something else. Disturbed snow, deep grooves, signs of a struggle. Her stomach twisted. The bear hadn't been chained there by accident. He had been dragged. Emily's throat tightened as she took a step closer. In the churned-up snow, she saw something half buried in the frost. She knelt, brushing the snow away until her fingers touched something metallic. A spent bullet casing. Her pulse quickened. Someone had shot at the bear. She swallowed hard, her mind racing. Had they intended to kill him and failed? Had they captured him for another reason? A sharp gust of wind howled through the trees, making Emily shiver. She knew she should turn back, but something inside her refused to walk away. She had to know the truth. She continued following the trail. As the minutes passed, the footprints grew more erratic, like someone had been moving quickly, possibly running. Then, through the dense trees, she saw it. A small, isolated cabin, barely visible beneath the thick layers of snow. Smoke curled from a rusty chimney, a clear sign that someone was inside. Her hands curled into fists. Whoever lived there had to be involved. Emily took a deep breath and stepped closer, keeping to the shadows of the trees. Her instincts told her to proceed with caution. As she got near the front of the cabin, she noticed something even more chilling. Hanging on the wooden porch were multiple animal pelts: wolves, foxes, even a massive black bear skin. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just a random hunter's cabin. This was the home of a poacher, and she had just walked straight into his territory. Just as Emily was about to step back, a noise from inside the cabin made her freeze. It was a low, gruff voice. Someone was talking. Her heart pounded as she crept around the side of the cabin, pressing her back against the wooden wall. She could hear them now. 2 voices, deep and raspy. She held her breath. "I told you," one voice growled. "The bear got loose. We should have killed it while we had the chance." Emily's blood ran cold. A second voice spoke, sounding irritated. "Damn chain snapped. Probably ran off by now. If we don't find it soon, it won't be worth a thing." Emily bit her lip to keep from gasping. They were looking for the bear. She pressed herself against the cabin wall, her mind racing. If these men found out what she had done, they wouldn't let her just walk away. And worse, they would try to track down the bear again. Emily knew she had to make a choice. Did she risk going inside and confronting the poachers? Or did she try to get out of there and find the bear before they did? She had only seconds to decide. She took a deep breath, her fists tightening. She knew what she had to do, but she had to act fast. Emily's mind spun with possibilities. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. She was alone, in the middle of nowhere, outside the cabin of 2 dangerous men who were actively searching for the same grizzly bear she had just freed. She knew one thing: if they found the bear first, it would not survive. Her breath misted in the freezing air as she pressed herself closer to the cabin's wall. She couldn't stay here. She needed to find the bear before they did. A creaking floorboard. Inside. Suddenly, she heard movement from inside. A heavy pair of boots thudded against the wooden floor. Then, a voice. "Let's head out now before the storm picks up," one of the men muttered. Emily's stomach clenched. If she waited too long, they'd be on the move. She had to go. Now. She took a step back from the cabin, careful not to make a sound, and darted into the tree line. Back into the wilderness. The cold wind cut against her skin as she moved deeper into the woods. Time was against her. She tried to retrace the bear's path, looking for signs of movement, any broken branches or tracks in the snow. The forest was vast, and the bear had been weak and exhausted. It couldn't have gotten far. Then, a set of paw prints appeared in the snow. Her heart leaped. She followed them, moving quickly but carefully. The deeper she went, the more signs she noticed. Small patches of disturbed snow, claw marks against tree bark. The bear was injured and slow, but it was still moving. Emily clenched her fists. She had to reach him first. The howl of a wolf. A long, eerie howl echoed through the trees. Emily's blood ran cold. Wolves. She knew these forests well enough to recognize a hunting call. Wolves were predators, and a weak, vulnerable bear would be an easy target. Emily's feet pounded against the frozen ground as she picked up speed, ignoring the burning in her legs. The prints ahead were still fresh, leading up a narrow hill. She was getting close. Then she saw him. The bear, collapsed in the snow. At the top of a small ridge, barely moving, lay the grizzly bear. His massive frame was hunched, his breath labored, his fur still damp from the snow. His eyes were half open, clouded with exhaustion. Emily felt a lump in her throat. He was giving up. And the worst part? The howls were getting closer. "Come on, big guy," she whispered, stepping toward him. "We have to move." The bear lifted his head weakly. His ribs showed through his fur, and his legs trembled as he struggled to stand. Emily reached out carefully, keeping her movements slow and steady. She knew she couldn't force him to move, but she could help. A desperate attempt to save him. She pulled off her backpack, grabbed a protein bar, and tore it open with her teeth. She extended it toward the bear, hoping the scent would stir him. His nose twitched. She prayed he had enough strength left to eat. The bear inched forward, taking a hesitant sniff. Then, with shaky movements, he took a bite. Emily let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. He was still fighting, but they weren't safe yet. The danger closing in. A snap of branches in the distance sent her heart into a frenzy. She whirled around, eyes scanning the trees. Something was coming. It could be the wolves. It could be the poachers. Either way, she was running out of time. She turned back to the bear. "Come on, buddy. You have to trust me." With a groan, the bear pushed himself up, his muscles shaking. Emily felt a surge of relief, but then she heard it. A gunshot. Her body froze. The poachers were closer than she thought. She grabbed a fallen tree branch, tossing snow over it to mask their tracks. She knew she couldn't stop them completely, but she could at least buy them time. She turned back to the bear. His legs wobbled, but he was standing. He had one last chance to escape, and Emily wasn't going to let him face this alone. "Let's go," she whispered. "I'm getting you out of here." With one last glance behind her, she led him deeper into the forest. The air was biting cold, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. Claire's breath came in short, misty puffs as she hurried through the dense forest, each step crunching the snow beneath her boots. The grizzly bear was still bound to the tree, shivering violently, its massive frame unnaturally frail from exhaustion and exposure to the elements. The sight broke her heart. The ropes had dug into its skin, leaving raw, bloody marks around its thick fur. Its breaths were slow and ragged, each exhale accompanied by a weak mist that vanished into the freezing air. It didn't even have the energy to struggle anymore. Claire dropped to her knees beside the bear, her hands trembling from both the cold and the overwhelming rush of emotions. She knew she had to act fast. Her fingers fumbled as she pulled a knife from her jacket. The knots were tight, deliberately cruel. Whoever had done this wanted to ensure that the bear wouldn't escape. The thought sent a surge of fury through her veins, but she pushed it aside. There was no time for anger, only action. She pressed the blade against the thick rope and began sawing furiously, her muscles burning from the effort. The bear flinched slightly at the sensation, but it didn't have the strength to resist. The thick, coarse strands refused to break at first, each cut feeling like a battle against time. Claire's fingers were nearly numb, but she didn't stop. After what felt like an eternity, the rope snapped. The grizzly let out a deep, exhausted groan as its massive body slumped forward, freed but unable to move. Claire quickly pulled her jacket off and draped it over the bear's shaking form, knowing it wasn't nearly enough to keep it warm, but hoping it would provide some comfort. She reached out slowly, placing her palm gently against the bear's head. Its deep brown eyes flickered open, filled with something she never expected. Trust. It could have attacked her. It should have, by instinct alone. But instead, it let out a low, weak huff, almost as if acknowledging her presence, accepting her help. Claire swallowed hard. She knew this wasn't over. The bear was free, but it was still dying. Its body was far too weak from dehydration and starvation. It wouldn't last much longer in this state. She had no idea how much time she had before it was too late. Her mind raced. There was no way she could carry the bear, not even with every ounce of strength in her body. It was too massive, too heavy, too weak to even stand. She needed help. Claire pulled out her phone with frozen fingers and dialed frantically. Nothing. No signal. A wave of panic crashed over her, but she forced herself to breathe. Think. She had to get back to the main road and find help, but she couldn't just leave the bear here alone. She knelt beside it once more. "I'll be back, I promise," she whispered. The grizzly's labored breaths were slowing. Claire's chest tightened. She had minutes, maybe less. She had to run. Her legs felt like they were moving on pure adrenaline as she sprinted back through the snow-covered forest, slipping, falling, pushing herself back up, every second feeling like a lifetime. She had no idea if she'd make it back in time, and she had no idea if the bear would still be alive when she did. Claire's lungs burned as she sprinted through the snow-covered forest, each breath a desperate gasp. Every step felt like a battle against exhaustion, against time. The bear needed help, and she was the only one who could make it happen. Her boots sank into the icy terrain, slowing her down, but she refused to stop. Her legs ached, her muscles screamed for rest, but the image of the freezing, helpless grizzly tied to that tree fueled her desperation. The main road wasn't far, but was she already too late? Bursting through the tree line, Claire spotted her truck parked haphazardly on the side of the road. She fumbled for the keys in her jacket, her hands shaking violently from the cold and adrenaline. Her fingers barely worked, stiff and numb, but she forced them to obey. She jumped into the driver's seat, turned the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Wasting no time, she grabbed her phone and tried again. No service. "Come on," she growled, slamming her fist against the dashboard. There was only one option left. She threw the truck into drive and floored the gas pedal, speeding toward the nearest ranger station. The tires skidded slightly on the icy road, but she kept control, her knuckles white as she gripped the wheel. The ranger station was nearly 6 miles away, and every second counted. The image of the bear, its sunken eyes, its trembling frame, the scars that marred its once powerful body, haunted her. She couldn't let it die. As soon as she reached the ranger station, she practically jumped out of the truck before it had fully stopped. Rushing inside, she saw Mike Carter, the senior ranger, sitting behind a desk, flipping through some paperwork. He barely had time to look up before Claire slammed her hands down in front of him. "I need help. Now." Mike frowned. "Claire, what's going on?" She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself enough to explain. "There's a grizzly, tied to a tree, freezing to death. Someone did this on purpose. It's barely alive. I need a rescue team now." Mike's expression darkened. "Where?" She quickly gave him the location, and he didn't hesitate. Within minutes, the entire station was mobilized. "Take the truck," Mike ordered, grabbing a radio. "We'll bring supplies. Claire, you lead the way." Relief flooded through her, but the fear never left. Was she already too late? The convoy of vehicles raced through the forest, the headlights cutting through the darkening evening sky. The snowfall had picked up, making visibility harder, but Claire's focus was unshaken. She led the group back to the clearing, her heart pounding in sync with the tires hitting every bump on the frozen ground. The second she reached the site, she jumped out of the truck and ran toward the tree. Her breath caught. The bear was still there, but it wasn't moving. "No, no, no," Claire whispered, sprinting toward it. The rescue team followed close behind, flashlights illuminating the grizzly's still form. Claire dropped to her knees, placing her hands on the bear's head. It was cold. "Please," she murmured. Then, a shallow breath. He was alive. "Get the sedative ready," one of the rangers shouted. They needed to transport the bear safely. They couldn't risk further injury. Claire backed away as the team worked quickly, expertly. They carefully injected a mild sedative, just enough to keep the bear calm but not too much to harm it further. Next, they wrapped the grizzly in insulated blankets to preserve its body heat. A makeshift stretcher was prepared, strong enough to carry its weight. It took 6 people to carefully lift the bear, maneuvering it onto the transport sled. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. He was going to make it. The next hour felt like an eternity. The rescue team transported the bear carefully, keeping watch over its breathing. The vet was already on standby at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, waiting with fluids, medication, and the best care possible. Claire sat in the back of the lead truck, watching the bear through the rear window. Even in this vulnerable state, even after all the suffering, he was still fighting. "Hang in there, big guy," she whispered. As the trucks pulled up to the rehab center, the veterinarians rushed out. The bear's fate now rested in their hands. The moment the truck stopped in front of the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, the team sprang into action. The bear, still wrapped in thermal blankets, lay motionless but breathing. Claire jumped out of the vehicle, her heart hammering against her chest. This was the final battle. 2 veterinarians, Dr. James Carter and Dr. Olivia Hart, were already waiting at the entrance. Their faces were grave, but their hands were steady. "Let's move," Dr. Carter commanded. The team carefully lifted the bear onto a mobile gurney, ensuring its weight was evenly distributed. It took every ounce of strength from 6 people to wheel the massive animal into the facility. Claire followed closely, watching as the doors to the emergency treatment room swung open. She wasn't allowed inside. All she could do now was wait. Claire paced the hallway outside the treatment room, rubbing her arms for warmth. The walls of the clinic were lined with photographs of animals that had been saved, rehabilitated, and returned to the wild. Would this bear's story be added to those walls one day? Time dragged on. She sat, stood, paced, and sat again. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. Finally, after what felt like hours, Dr. Hart emerged from the room, pulling off her gloves. Claire rushed to her. "How is he?" Dr. Hart gave a tired but reassuring smile. "He's stable, but it was close." Relief flooded Claire's body. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He had severe malnutrition, dehydration, hypothermia, and multiple old wounds, most likely from past mistreatment. "But he's a fighter," Dr. Hart continued. "We've given him fluids, treated his wounds, and started a refeeding plan." Claire nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Can I see him?" Dr. Hart hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "For a few minutes. He's still sedated, so don't expect much movement." Claire followed her into the dimly lit treatment room. The bear lay on a thick padded mat, tubes running from his body to monitors that beeped softly in the background. His once matted, frozen fur had been cleaned, revealing deep scars along his back and legs. Claire knelt beside him, her fingers grazing the soft fur near his massive paw. "You made it." Her voice was barely a whisper. The bear's chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. He had fought so hard. Claire clenched her fists. Who had done this to him? The collar, the scars, the fear in his eyes. It all pointed to something sinister. "We'll find them," she murmured, "and we'll make sure this never happens again." Dr. Hart placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've reported the case to local authorities. If there's a history of abuse, we'll do everything we can to track down who did this." Claire nodded. It wasn't enough to just save this bear. She needed justice. Days turned into weeks. The bear, affectionately named Kodiak by the clinic staff, slowly regained his strength. At first, he could barely lift his head, but soon he started standing, then walking. His once dull, lifeless eyes began to shine with renewed vitality. Claire visited every day. She watched as Kodiak took his first steps outside the enclosure, cautiously sniffing the air. His ears twitched at the sounds of the wind rustling the trees. It was as if he was remembering what freedom felt like. For the first time, he wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was healing. The day of his release came sooner than Claire expected. Dr. Carter called her early one morning. "It's time." Claire's heart clenched. She had known this moment would come, but was she ready? She arrived at the release site, a protected wildlife reserve, where Kodiak would have a second chance at life, away from harm. The large transport crate was opened, and for a moment Kodiak hesitated. He turned, locking eyes with Claire one last time. She held her breath. Then he stepped out. First, cautiously, then with more confidence. And then, finally, he was gone, disappearing into the trees. His home. Claire smiled through her tears. "Be free, big guy. You deserve it." Kodiak's story didn't end there. The investigation into his abuse led authorities to an illegal wildlife trafficking ring. Several arrests were made, and more animals were rescued from captivity. Claire had started this journey to save one bear, but in the end, she helped save many more. As she stood at the edge of the forest, listening to the distant rustling of leaves, she knew Kodiak was out there, thriving, and that was all she needed to know. If this story inspired you, remember, kindness and courage can change lives. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share this story to help spread awareness about protecting wildlife. Together, we can make a difference.